everyone, my name is Taylor Koploff, and today I wanted to talk to you all about a rather sensitive topic, but it's important to discuss because it actually comes up quite frequently in any business, company, or organization. Harassment comes in many different forms, but the most common is definitely sexual harassment. It can happen at any time, any place, to any person. It's important to recognize that sexual harassment is disruptive to any organization, and it creates an unsafe and uncomfortable working environment. Now, before we start, I wanted you all to write down some initial thoughts you have on harassment of any kind on the paper I provided you. So if you want to just take a minute or so to write those thoughts down. All right, so if anyone wants to share some of their thoughts, okay? All right, so feeling like a sexual object, okay. Feeling uncomfortable at work because of repeated compliments, okay. Verbal or physical harassment, okay. Those are all great. Now, can anyone give me a real life example of sexual harassment or any kind of harassment? I know it's a little uncomfortable, so I will just say that over my years in the business world, I have experienced some form of harassment one way or another, and at the time I may have taken it as a joke or brushed it off, or the harasser might have thought he was just joking, and it wasn't until later that I realized that it actually was sexual harassment, and it definitely wasn't okay. Although other forms of harassment can cause an unsafe work environment, the most common is sexual harassment. Now, if everyone could turn to page 2 for me. This leads us to the overall objective for this session. By the end of this training session, you will all be able to recognize, describe, and provide examples of the 2 types of harassment. So let's start off with what is harassment. The EEOC defines harassment under the law as unwelcome conduct based on race, color, sex, national origin, religion, age, disability, or genetic information. Harassment is actually protected under employment anti-discrimination law. Harassment constitutes an unsafe work environment, and it can cause discomfort for everybody in the office. Harassment can be verbal or physical. Verbal harassment, that includes jokes, innuendos, slurs, name calling, and many other verbal offenses. And then we also have physical harassment. Of course, that includes physical assault and unwanted touching or conduct. Physical harassment often includes sexual harassment, if you can guess. So that leads us to sexual harassment. Now that we're more familiar with harassment and all that that entails, what exactly constitutes sexual harassment? So sexual harassment includes, but is not limited to, unwanted sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, sexually explicit comments or statements, or sexually discriminatory remarks that is offensive to the recipient. Sexual harassment also includes sex discrimination. And sex discrimination is any type of bias on the basis of sex stereotyping, or discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, even discrimination on the basis of pregnancy. Sexual harassment holds the purpose of interfering with an individual's work performance and creating an intimidating or offensive working environment. According to a survey conducted by Wakefield Research, 78% of accused harassers are men, and 73% of people said their harassers were in a senior position to them in the company. With that being said, it's also very important to remember that harassers can be any gender and hold any position in the company. They can even be someone who's not part of the company, maybe a delivery driver or a vendor or a client. And it can happen inside the office or outside the office. It can even happen at a holiday party maybe. Now, if anyone could tell me where else could sexual harassment possibly occur? Okay, a sales call. Yes, definitely a sales call. Okay, yes, work parties. All right, those are all valid places, yes. All right, now, it's also important to understand what behaviors lead to sexual harassment. If everyone could please look at page 5 in your training manuals. Okay, so part of understanding sexual harassment is knowing what behaviors lead to it. Sexual harassment is linked to prejudiced and sexist attitudes, and our cultural beliefs about men and women greatly affect our behavior. These next behaviors that I'm about to list may not legally constitute sexual harassment alone, but they often lead to it or are mixed in with sexual harassment. So we have unwanted flirting, long stares and suggestive looks, frequent requests for dates, whistling or catcalling, hugging, back scratching, all that. Texting and sexting explicit messages or pictures via cell phone also constitutes sexual harassment. Anyone who can usually step back and assess the behavior that's happening, any reasonable person could ask themselves, is this okay? So now we will talk about the types of sexual harassment. So the first type of sexual harassment is hostile environment harassment, and that occurs when the conduct unreasonably interferes with an individual's work performance or creates an intimidating working environment. And this can be words, signs, displays in the break room, intimidation, physical actions or violence, and pranks. And now we have quid pro quo, and that is when a person in authority threatens, trades, or tries to trade job benefits for sexual favors. This includes demotions or denial of opportunity if refused a sexual relationship. Okay, so with all of that, I would like to have you turn to page 7 in your training manuals. And we are going to do an exercise, and this assesses any kind of sexual harassment that you have experienced at work over the past 5 months. You don't have to share, of course. You are not held accountable for it. No one will talk to you about it. This could be for your eyes only. So if you could please answer the questions on the paper provided using the scale, 1 being never and 5 being very often. So you could take a few minutes to do that. All right. And if everyone is finished, if you are comfortable with it, feel free to share your responses or maybe turn to your seatmate and discuss it and provide examples. Okay. All right. So it seems as though maybe all of us have been around harassment. It has happened to us. And if it hasn't happened to you and you haven't seen it, at least now you're more aware of how frequently it actually happens. Now let's talk about the key takeaways about sexual harassment. So it is damaging to any organization, and it creates an unsafe environment that nobody wants to be a part of. It interferes with an individual's work performance, and it creates hostility in the office. It includes unwanted touching, sexual advances, sexual favors, explicit statements or jokes. Sexual harassers, they tend to be men, but they can be any gender or in any position. So there's no bias created when I say that. Sex discrimination is a form of harassment. And sexual harassment cases can be decreased through awareness and frequent training. All right, now before we end this session, I would like everyone to look at page 9 of your training manual. And there is another exercise that will help you assess what you've learned about sexual harassment. Please answer the true and false questions on the paper provided. And I'll give you a few minutes to complete that. All right, if everyone is finished, I'd like to go over the questions with you so you can see what you got right and what you got wrong. Okay. Okay, so for number 1, sexual harassment is protected under the law. Is that true or false? That is true. Now we have question number 2. Verbal sexual harassment can include jokes, innuendos, slurs, name-calling, and insults, among other things, as long as the behavior is a protected trait. Yes, that is true. That is true. Okay, so number 3. Repeatedly asking someone out, even after they refuse it, is not sexual harassment. False. That is considered a form of sexual harassment. So next we have number 4. Talking with others about a coworker's body or appearance is not sexual harassment because it's just a joke. That is definitely false, for sure. All right, so number 5, customers or vendors are exempt from sexual harassment because they cannot contribute to a hostile workplace environment. That is false. It does constitute sexual harassment even if the person is not part of the company. Number 6, calling a man a hunk or a stud is okay because men rarely get offended by these types of labels and are usually flattered by them. Nope, you gotta leave that one at home. That is false. So number 7, we have quid pro quo sexual harassment occurs when a manager or supervisor offers job benefits in exchange for sexual favors. That is true. That is true. Okay, texting or sexting explicit messages to a coworker constitutes sexual harassment. Yes, it does. It definitely does. True or false, number 9, it is considered sexual harassment even if I am not directing my sexual comments to a specific coworker. Yep, that is true. That is sexual harassment. All right, now finally we got number 10. Sexual harassment cannot occur at a work party because it's outside of the office. That one is false. All right, so grade yourselves a little bit, see how you did on that. Right. Now I wanted everyone to take some time after this session to review the exercises we did and maybe even share with your coworkers. And if anyone has any questions, I am always here to help. Thank you guys so much for your time and attentiveness today. Everyone have a good rest of the day.